Case file. Open the windows of heaven. Rain, promise, or blank check?
All right, let's open up a case file on what might be one of the most famous promises in the entire Bible. You've probably heard it quoted, maybe 100 times. But what does it actually mean when God promises to open the windows of heaven? And here it is, Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. The promise of God opening up the windows of heaven. You know, for a lot of people, this verse is the cornerstone of their financial teaching. It's seen as a direct link between giving money and getting money back. But is that really what the people who first heard it would have understood? And that really brings us to the central question of our whole investigation. When God made this promise, was he talking about, a divine direct deposit, an unexpected check in the mail? Or was he talking about something far more basic, something absolutely essential for survival in the ancient world? To solve this case, we have to start where any good investigation does, with the core evidence. We're going to put that key phrase, windows of heaven, right under the microscope and see what it tells us. Now, here's our number one rule for this investigation. Context is king. It's everything. We can't just pluck a verse out of its original time and place and expect it to mean the same thing to us today. We have to be detectives here and look at how these exact words were used in their original setting. So here's the first major clue. When we search through the Old Testament, this phrase, windows of heaven, isn't some big mystery. It actually has a very specific and really consistent meaning. It refers to rain. That's it. It was just a poetic way of describing the sky opening up and letting water pour down. And check this out. This is Exhibit A. In the story of Noah and the Great Flood, Genesis 7 tells us the windows of the heavens were opened. Now, was God sending Noah a bonus check? Of course not. This is one of the clearest examples you can find. It meant a massive, world-changing downpour of rain. Okay, so we've got a solid lead on what the words meant. Now let's move to the next phase of the investigation. We need to recreate the scene. What was life actually like for the people Malachi was talking to? You really have to get this picture in your head. Malachi wasn't speaking to a society of office workers and tech entrepreneurs. He was talking to farmers. Their entire world, their whole life, revolved around the land. Their economy, their tithing system, it was all based on crops and livestock. The storehouse they were told to bring their tithes to, it wasn't a bank. It was a literal storeroom for grain and produce. And if you need any more proof, get this. Just look at the very next verse. God doesn't say, I'll keep your stock portfolio from crashing. He says, I will rebuke the devourer, so it will not destroy the fruits of your soil. He's talking about things like locusts and crop disease. This is 100% farming language. So let's just put it all together. When we hear windows of heaven today, our modern minds, totally shaped by a cash economy, we immediately jump to money. Salary increases, unexpected checks, right? But an ancient Israelite farmer, they would have heard a promise of rain, a promise of a good harvest, a promise of survival and prosperity in the only terms that truly made sense to them. But hold on, the case doesn't end there. We have to look at a new piece of evidence that kind of adds a twist to how we think about giving altogether. The arrival of the New Covenant. See, in the New Testament, the writers are still all about radical generosity. That part doesn't change one bit. But what does change is the framing. The focus shifts away from a specific transactional formula, give X to get Y, and it moves toward the attitude of the heart, willing, cheerful generosity that comes from a place of trust. And here's the key text for that. The Apostle Paul doesn't say give 10% so God will open the windows of heaven for you. He says give what you've decided in your own heart, and do it cheerfully, not because you feel forced or because you're expecting a specific payback. The emphasis is completely different. So this is the big question, right? If Malachi 3 isn't a direct financial formula, does that mean God just stopped blessing people who are generous? And the answer is, of course God blesses generosity. The Bible is filled with that principle from front to back. But our investigation, this specific case file, is laser-focused. The question isn't, does God bless? The question is, did this one specific verse in Malachi establish a timeless, universal, tied-for-cash formula? And that's where context becomes our most important tool. Okay, we've examined the evidence from all the different angles. We've looked at the language, the historical scene, and that new covenant shift. It's time for the final analysis. It's time to deliver the verdict. So let's just recap the case real quick. The key phrase, windows of heaven, consistently points to rain. Malachi's world was agricultural through and through. The very next verse is literally about protecting crops. And the idea of a modern financial application, it's just not clearly established in the text itself. The evidence is pointing overwhelmingly in one direction.
And so the verdict is in. Based on all the textual and historical evidence, the promise made in Malachi 3:10 was a specific promise to an agricultural nation living under an old covenant. It was a promise that their obedience in bringing their tithes, which were their crops, would be met with the blessing they needed most, rain for future crops.
So, what do we do with this verdict? We don't just close the file and walk away. We should take some inspiration from the Bereans in the book of Acts. They were praised not for blindly accepting what they were taught, but for going back to the source material themselves to see if it was true. So this is your mandate. When you hear a teaching, don't panic. Investigate it. Don't just assume it's true. Examine the context. And maybe most importantly, don't outsource your own understanding of Scripture to someone else. You have what it takes to dig in and see for yourself. And that's really the bottom line. The promise was real, the blessing was powerful, but in Malachi's day, that blessing fell as rain, not as direct deposits. Case closed.
If the cross put it to death, we tag it, tow it, and refuse to resurrect it. Share it if it helped you. Subscribe if someone else needs it. We sow truth the way Jesus taught, not the way man demands.